All right, so good morning, everyone. You're at the second edition of the Aloinett Policy Writing Masterclass series. My name is Teniola Tayo with Aloinett Advisors. And here we also have Ida Oluwole, who is an associate with Aloinett. And today we have a guest speaker, Oluwole Ojewale. He's the regional coordinator ENACT ISS. But then, more interestingly, even for this webinar, is that he has authored many policy writing articles, as well as academic writing articles. I should actually introduce him as Dr. Oluwole Ojewale because he completed a PhD not too long ago. Wole, you're very welcome. It's really a pleasure to have you here. Thank you for agreeing to join this discussion, and thank you for making yourself available. I know it's a Saturday morning, quite early Saturday morning in Senegal at the moment. So also thank you to your family for excusing you for us today. So I think the first thing I'd like to ask is if you can just tell us a bit about yourself. And sometimes when I ask people to do this, I want them to go way back. If I'm talking about myself as a fiction writer, I'll talk about the first story I wrote when I was 9 years old. So now as a policy writer, I want you to start from, the first thing that you wrote, what inspired you to write it, and what the journey has looked like so far.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much, Tenny, for this opportunity. I think it's something that I would say has taken many parts over the years. And sometimes you show up in meetings and you introduce yourself and people already have a framing of where they think you are coming from, maybe as far as academic background is concerned. So I am one of those persons who studied from BSc to PhD level, a course that I didn't have interest in, which in our parlance in those days, we would say they gave me the course. It took many years before I realized that they actually made you an offer and you accepted the offer. And then, so it wasn't that they gave you a course. And then who has ended up doing things that are completely unrelated to the things that I studied. And then who also went ahead to pursue a PhD in a course, which even the basic practices that govern it now, I can't remember, or maybe have a fair idea. And I'm saying as an urban planner, you put me in a town planning office now, those things that we did in undergraduate days, I can't really recall any of them again. So I'm saying this to underscore the fact that knowledge converges. And what you actually need essentially is the capacity to understand. So the moment you understand, except maybe for a few specialized courses like law and medicine and related courses, I think anyone can move anywhere to anything. So that is a bit of my story. And I've had to write things that you can't see on my CV today. I think apart from maybe trying to read and write from secondary school, primary school, secondary school to the university, and someone that has multi-interest. As a matter of fact, my SSC course at WAHEC had a blend of literature with government and all these things, to the extent that I could go to the university to study law. At the same time, I could study courses like accounting and economics, but I headed up in environmental design and management. And the flair for writing really came into the fore when I was doing my master's degree. We had a lecturer, my supervisor actually, we had a course that is supposed to be a mini thesis, but his philosophy is that, okay, write a paper and then I will make it that your mini thesis for you. So we call it independent project. So rather than concentrating on writing that many theses, anybody that went through my research advisor, we have to write a paper. So we started on that note, writing, publishing, sending papers to journals that are way beyond our capability. I remember I sent a journal to quarterly, an article to Quarterly Journal of Economics. And the professor that reviewed it same day is, when I Googled the name, he's seated in Harvard. And, it's just like picking the paper and throwing it into the trash bin. It was later when I went to check the journal ranking that I realized that I hit far beyond my capability. But the story of it is also that in the course of reviewing that paper sporadically for the professor, He suggested that I think you are trying to write on a correlate of environmental behavior. I picked the topic, adapted it again, sent it elsewhere. You know, there are these journals that if you're an academic, they call it them predatory journals, you know. At that level, you just want to have your name in the domain. It's not that you have any ego to protect as a scholar, as it were. So the journey started that way. I told you that I wrote things that you can't see on my CV. So when you look at the things that I've done, you can't see solid waste management on my CV again, even though I wrote papers there that have been cited. And then the defining moment was I had a friend that was also doing, is a senior lecturer now, who was writing on crime. So in those days, we would do collaborations, let's write together. And then he invited us to write a paper on crime with him, I think maybe on IFE or thereabout. So I ended up writing 2 papers when I was concluding my master's on waste management and another 2 papers on crime. So I went to work with Center for Public Policy Alternatives in Lagos briefly for about 6 months. And then I got a job with Center for Law Enforcement Education, Clean Foundation, where I actually pushed forward that I know a bit about crime, I know a bit about security because that is their area of work. So I joined Clean Foundation, and then I started working on security sector reform. I'm narrating this because this is what took me away from my environmental design and management, and then took me to where I am now that I've been working on security sector reform. But when you look at the background and what I'm doing, you can't reconcile both. And it is to say the fact that I know we have different people who are here listening to us today. You don't have to necessarily be defined by where you come from, what you studied. It is the interest that matters. And like I said, there's such a thing as knowledge convergence. Since I can understand sociological issues, I can understand public policy, you can also bring that experience to bear. So I was writing for the Afrobarometer as a national partner of Clean Foundation, writing on election, writing on all kinds of things around governance in those days. They took us to the University of Cape Town for 1 month to actually teach us how to write and then how to also use data, because that is very, very important. So it's been a journey of a bit here, a bit there in terms of writing. I still see myself as a generalist who is trying to find a place where maybe 5 years down the line we define the things that I write. And these are some of the things that I think I'm going to share when we get to that aspect in terms of should I quickly specialize, or should I still maintain a generalist posture? At one point, should I allow this thing to define my writing career? So I've written a bit. You asked a question about the first thing that I wrote. I think the first thing that I wrote was on waste management. But in those days, we were only writing for academic purpose. It is along the line that we now realize that rather than just writing where the thing is stuck in places where people that actually need it might not see them. So we then started devising this idea of I've written. Can I summarize this write-up, this article in 1,000 words, and probably put it in the newspaper, put it in platforms like maybe Brookings or Foreign Affairs or some of these, and we also have them in Nigeria. You can even put it maybe in Premium Times, or even in Africa, like Africa Report, which is read across board on the continent, because I know I'm speaking to the international audience as well. So that you put whatever you have written, you summarize whatever you have written, and put it in places where people can actually see them. That is the first level. And the second level is that sometimes too, it is also very important to seek an audience for the people who have the duty of care of the implementation of your recommendation. Anybody that is able to attain to this level, I think, has really gone far, because it's not enough to provide solutions about challenges of Africa or challenges of the world. If you happen to have a contact with people who can actually act on the things that
well,
you're
Wale,
writing.
you're already getting me into spaces that we're going to, cover later in conversation.
Okay.
I know that the knowledge is brimming, but then we're going to actually get to that. Thank you so much for that. So for those that have just joined, the first step was to meet our speaker, to meet Wale, Dr. Wale, as I said, we should even be addressing him as, to know how he started his journey in writing. There are many things that you said that I related with. I think for me, my undergrad was in psychology and information studies. So very much not what I am doing now. But then, you know how they say no knowledge is wasted. So even from my understanding of human behavior, I was able to apply it to my writing and even to advocacy. You also mentioned why you shifted from academic writing to and expanded wider to also policy writing. And it was my experience earlier in my career. Ida mentioned that I have 3 years in policy writing. Yes, I've been writing actively for 3 years, but then my policy career is getting close to 10 years now. And I realized that I'll be trying to do research for a government agency, you know, in my early days. And then all of the knowledge was stuck in journals that I couldn't access. So I would try to open the paper. I have to pay money. It wasn't possible. And I was thinking, these are the people that really need this information, but then they can't access it. So there is that bridge there, which is what policy writing is, a bridge between research or academic research and then the policy space. So translating what is already out there in academic research in a way that policymakers can use it. But thank you very much for that intro. So now to everyone in the meeting, thank you for being here again. We have people from across Africa, from what I saw from the registration list. Thank you for making the time. And I hope that you're able to get what you want from this session. So I reviewed some of the questions that were asked as part of as part of the registration, and some people were saying how, you know, they want to learn more about how to write, how to build thought leadership, how to increase collaboration. Some people are in the academic space, they want to do more policy writing. Some people are trying to just get their work out there. We're going to touch on a lot of these questions, but just a note that we did have a session last year on how to write policy articles. So that was a very in-depth session on the technicalities of that. So we won't be repeating that today. But then after this particular workshop, we'll share again the link with you to the video for that session where we break that down in detail. So for today, we're going to talk about domain specialization, which, you know, Wole was already talking about, how to choose an area. We're going to talk about writing, but then more around deciding what you want to write about, negotiating collaborations, reviewing your work, writing discipline, which is a key question for people and which is linked to the issue of reaching your goals, your writing goals. Then reviewing your work, publishing, finding platforms like Wole already started to talk about, and then increasing the impact of your writing, which is then linked to thought leadership, because it's not enough to just write and put it out there. How do you increase the impact, and how do you now become to be regarded as a thought leader in your space? And then we'll talk about setting and achieving writing goals. So this is going to be very interactive. Thank you to those that are already, you know, speaking in the chat. I can see Victoria from a student in Cambridge. I can see God's Time from Abuja, Ayomide from Abuja, Peter from Nigeria, Richard Jenny from Abuja. A lot of Abuja people, my Abuja people. It's good to have you here. And if you have any questions at any point, put them in the chat. It's gonna be a back and forth. So I'm going to be having a conversation with Wole, but then inviting people to join in actually periodically. So even if you want to say something, you can raise your hand. There is no separate question and answer session. It's gonna be a general discussion amongst all of us. So now we're going to start with domain specialization. And Wole, you already started to touch on this. And at the last workshop, you know, last year, it was something that people were asking, how do you choose an area to specialize in? A lot of people were saying that, you know, they feel like they are generalists. They write, so they have many different interests. They have many different topics that they want to write on, but then they're not sure how to choose an area or whether to choose an area. You described yourself as a generalist, but then there is a fact that at this moment, you're seen to be a thought leader in a particular space, which is about transnational organized crime. Even though you're able to comment on political issues across Africa and within Nigeria, or on conflicts in general. But then for you, what would you say was the journey towards specialization at this time? Would you say that it was more as a result of the role that you're currently holding with the ISS, with Enact ISS? Or would you say that you deliberately curated expertise in a particular area just so that it will be easy for people to identify you with that field? Yeah.
Yes, thank you so much, Tenny. I will try to be as practical as much as possible on this and connect it to the nitty-gritty. I am of the view that, whatever we do, there's also a political economy of the things that we do. Everybody here is relatively young. And then we are still at the stage where we are developing our career. So for me, what should frame specialization at the initial stage? Perhaps when your first 10 years, let's assume you have 30 years of active work, I think is to seek opportunities to touch on multi-domain, so that future opportunities, you can always have something to show that, okay, I've worked this area and I think I can take on this role. So that is the political economy side of the issues that I'm trying to say here, because on a final analysis, when you write, when you become thought leaders, you are not doing that just for the sake of maybe community service. You also want to profit from the things that you do. And I'm connecting this to maybe monetary gain, networks and connections and all these things. So it is very, very important for me, because on a lighter note, you have bills to pay and you don't want to put yourself in a pigeonhole that the only thing that they know you about is gender or HIV and all those things, when the brain is capable of doing so many things. And to be able to exert yourself in those domains, I think along the line, you should demonstrate thought leadership in those arenas. So that is the number one thing, the practical dimension for me. The second thing is that if you have ever worked within the civil society space or NGO or nonprofit in Nigeria, you are almost a general duty officer. So election projects come, they put it on your table. Human trafficking project comes, they put it on your table. Food security project come, they put it on your table. Good governance project come, they put it on your table. And since it's the same methodology in terms of advocacy, you continue to apply the skill along the line. And then you end up like a generalist in that sense of it. And then what happened in my case is that there are a lot of things that I did that I can't put on my CV. At some point in Nigeria, I was working on administration of criminal justice. I'll go to meeting with lawyers. They're talking about this amendment, this section, and all those things. The project has been put on my table. It is expected that I should be able to deliver on that. But sometimes I feel like I'm not a lawyer. So I'm implementing the project, but I'm not really excited about this is not what I want to do for my life. You know, I've also had to work on food security project. I'm not, some organizations just came from the US and they said they want to partner with us because we have done research. And then, you know, you need money. The organization need money. Then we jump at it. I was in Niger State, I was in Cross River State collecting data on food security, market, and all those things. You won't see such on my CV. But it doesn't mean that if tomorrow one opportunity comes and they are linking food security to maybe conflict or banditry or terrorism, you go into the archive and pull it out and put it on the CV to say, my work actually is on security, but I've also linked this to security before. I've worked in Niger State, I've worked with pharma, I've worked with this. So for me, it is always something that will be useful along the line. That is the number one thing that I want to say. And then in the process, I also have to develop my writing skills along this line. Like I told you, it started with security sector reform. And then along the line, the closest thing that I think I did as far as organized crime is concerned was anti-corruption project. And it is at advocacy level, not really maybe writing. And then we did a work on human trafficking in Edo State in Nigeria. And then a bit of studies of what things that come up on arms trafficking along the line. So these are things that now shape my worldview about specialization. And if you look at the things that I've talked about, which I think you are also familiar with, because at some point, if I want to define Tenny now, if anybody say I should talk about Tenny, I will say Tenny is passionate about trade, but she has worked on violent extremism. She has worked on counter-terrorism. She has worked on so many things, which speaks to the capability of the human brain to do so many things. But along the line, I also found out that you started making sure that your core area of interest is actually getting into issues of violent extremism, terrorism, counterinsurgency. And at that point, you started looking at how trade should be part of the counterinsurgency, non-kinetic operation to bring peace to the Northeast, and then the Lake Chad Basin as an area. So for me, it is the capability to fuse these things together. If you look on my Twitter and do the way I describe myself as an expert on West and Central Africa on organized crime, conflict, security, and fragility. These are things that are interwoven together. And having looked at the things that I've done over the years, I decided that let me sieve this out. I can work on election. For 5 years, I was working on election security in Nigeria, but you won't see it on my CV or my core issues that I discuss. And some of my media appearances as a result of the things that I've done before, that people feel like people don't know that you've moved. I'll give you an instance. One of the media houses during the Kenyan Ruto's climate conference in Kenya. So I started talking to her about climate change and all those things. And she said, are you a jack of all trades? And I said, what do you mean? I've written on deforestation. This is linked to climate change. And I sent those articles to her. And she was like, she doesn't know that they are only inviting me for security. I said, because that is the thing that you know me about. It doesn't mean that I don't have vested interest in these other areas too. And like Job, I told her, I said, this is what pays the bill, transnational organized crime. But core interest is, this is where they are paying my salary. I'm working as an expert on transnational organized crime. This is where I get my salary. But in terms of the things that I've done, I also have other areas where I'm daily researching to build my capacity to continue to be a thought leader in that regard. But I can't define, since I don't have an organization that I've started myself, I can't wake up tomorrow and tell my organization that, come, this is the only thing I do. This one that you are putting on my table is just secondary. As long as it's tied to my B, interest, I generate interest, and they've not found my work wanting. So at some point, it can't be forever. By next year, I will have done 10 years unbroken pursuing this career trajectory. And then at that point, going forward, for me, which I think should also be an advice for most people, one will now have to start using the 10 years to actually consolidate on the core things that maybe 3 or 4 things that, and they must be interrelated so that you don't see as jack of all trades. I have friends, I have people that possibly they have longer career stay than me, or even that are my contemporary that they don't, sometimes they look at me and like, what is really your own interest? For instance, I have a friend who all his life has been working on counter-violent extremism. You won't see him venturing into other things. And he has become a thought leader in that field. I meet professors at conferences and they say, oh, that boy, okay, yes. I think he has been focusing on counter-violent extremism. We used to work together, all those things. So you look at what is actually good for you, you look at your environment, and you look at what lies ahead in the recess of it, and areas that you think you can be competent. And another thing is that you have certain latent potentials that you also don't want them to go to waste. So if you have people that can multitask in terms of knowledge generation, competence deployment, around 3-4 things, I think is very good at the initial stage, because these are things that are going to define our career along the line, the things that you write about. And as a writer, you look at the nexus of these things and then settle on that.
Exactly. Thank you so much for that. Because, one of the definitions of intelligence is knowing how to create connections, or seeing the connections, amongst things. And you mentioned my own writing part. So when people were seeing me as a trade expert, at the time I was working on Boko Haram issues. So even though that was my day job, but because I had a long-term interest in the trade and investment space, I made sure that my writing was curated in that direction as well. Even when I would write on conflict issues, I would bring in the issues of business, investment, and industry and trade as well. But then there's a lot of things that you've said there, and I think there are pros and cons in both directions. So you have made a case for generalism, at least like you said, at the earlier stages, and then, narrowing down later on. You've also recognized that for people that don't even go the generalist approach at the beginning, that it has also worked for them. So when they choose one area and then they just decide to stick with it throughout, there are benefits of that sometimes as well. You mentioned the practical issues, such as maybe you work in a space, whether it's with civil society or in consulting, where you may get different kinds of things on your table, and very quickly you need to know how to learn about that area and understand the area better. So that is also the case for generalism. But on the other side, so in terms of the pros and cons, there's also the fact that sometimes, even at the earlier stages, 3, 5, or mid-career level, when you're trying to apply for a role, if there is no clear trajectory in one direction, it can also work against you if you're not able to demonstrate that although you've worked in these different spaces, you are still very well suitable for this particular role, even as compared to somebody that has just stayed in that role. So there are pros and cons of the different approaches, but then we have to just figure out what seems to align more with our own career goals, with our own long-term future goals. Are you looking at being able to do a wide range of projects across different fields, or are you trying to build very specific expertise in one direction, even at the early stages? So we have two questions that I think I'll bring in at this point. Maybe starting with Fatiha, since you have your hand up. Fatiha, you'd like to ask a question?
Yes. Thank you very much, and good morning to everyone. Thank you very much again, Dr. Oluwole. I think my question goes around how to write policy writings.
Fatiha, I think we lost you. Can others hear her?
That don't sound or don't the decision makers and say people who are in charge of making policies will definitely not have, a lot of time to go through. You sort of merge it in a way that it is very related. Where exactly do you think we can always go to say find data, considering there are some, and it was a bit of a struggle to actually find data in that sense. So I don't know if you can help with these two questions. Thank you.
Okay, sorry, Wale, this question is on writing, so that's the next section, so we'll be able to deal with it there. Maybe, so Fatiha, we'll be coming to that in just a bit. The second question from Chigo is also on, so it was linked to your own background, Wale. So she was asking, is it necessary to start with academic writing before coming down to policy writing? I think definitely you can speak better to that because I never ventured much into academic writing. So over to you, Wale.
Yes, thank you so much. I think it's always a good thing to start if you have academic writing interest on the long run. To start on that note is going to help to clarify your understanding in how to write policy papers, policy articles. The slight difference is that for policy articles, there is no room for all the unnecessary baggages that you see in academics. And this is also the reason why most of the times they say academics are speaking to one another. I know one or two of us here. You have picked papers sometimes and you are wondering that, okay, what is this person actually saying? How does this solve our problems? So academic, they write and then they quote each other, they cite each other, and some people have come up with the idea that some of the ideas that they are propounding is they say they don't, I mean, they are outdated or they are talking to each other and they find it difficult to reconcile them with the policy demand of the day. So you won't see, for instance, you are writing a policy article. Two things are very, very important. The number one thing is that you quickly identify what the problem is and then provide some form of gaps and analysis. And the users of academic articles most of the times are looking for recommendations. What are the things that we should be doing? What are the things that we've not been doing that we should do? So for me, I really don't see so much of a line of a difference between the two if you are able to straddle both points. Like if you have been exposed to academic writing, one of the things that they teach us is problem identification. You are able to identify a problem, and then you identify one from the prevailing realities, and at the same time, you identify from what are the missing link in literature? What are the areas that have not been covered? For instance, I was talking to someone yesterday about the Boko Haram insurgency in Nigeria's northeast and the entire Lake Chad Basin. And the person was talking about the dimension that I've never thought about. It's a groundbreaking research. The essence why I think it's good to match the boat is that to merge both is that there's a lot of blind spots for policy writing because you want to quickly make it quick, make it shorter. So sometimes we don't go into the depth of the analysis in terms of going to what the literature have been saying, the past studies, because you are doing policy writing, most of the times maybe they're hyperlinks or maybe 3 or 5 references. So if you develop your academic capability, like the example that I cited yesterday, what the person is talking about is far, far deep, that it is very, very unlikely that policymakers, policy actors, policy writers are going to pay attention to that, because it's something that dates back to over 100 years. You are not going to unravel that if you don't do a deep scholarly analysis, a deep scholarly search to be able to arrive at such findings, or such, the curiosity that is going to propel you into that. So for me, anybody that has undertaken a master's degree at the lowest limit is able to also crisscross policy writing with scholarly writing, because you did what they call projects in some places, you did what they call thesis, dissertation, or whatever they call it. And the essence of that is to make one a deep thinker, someone that can search deep. So for me, what I would recommend is that skill set that has been gained in that regard, you should also try to, as much as possible, making it to be relevant to your policy writing. But you must not bog your policy readers with the academic, theoretical framework, conceptual framework, or whatever they call it. They are in haste, and most of the times you can only catch their attention with maybe 1,000 to 3,000 words. And to that extent, you can see an academic paper that is going into 12,000 words. Nobody is going to read that if you are going to be talking to maybe policymakers, advisors of government, and all those things. And the second thing that I think is very, very important for me to stress in this regard is that it doesn't matter where you start from. What is very, very important is that you have the interest to advance solutions to society's problem. So you have people who write sand columns on the pages of newspapers, who don't necessarily go into academic debate and all those things. And you find out that the people in the corridor of power are actually reading those columns in newspaper. So for me, it is neither here nor there. If you are able to combine both, excellent. But if you cannot combine both, what I think is very, very important is that one, when you write, as much as possible, try to make sure that the things that you write are accessible to people that need them. Is very, very important. And the second thing is that as much as possible, it's good to also cultivate relationship, to be able to actually not only expect people to read what you write, but to cultivate that relationship, to talk to the people who have the duty of care to implement what you write. And that is the reason why at every opportunity, at every instance, we try to talk to people in government, because what you cannot do with 10 years of advocacy, of writing and all those things, one day access to political power, to policy makers, can cause a big change in the things that you are recommending. So for me, if the person that asks the question has done at least pursue at least a master's degree, I think the skill set in those places can also be useful to bring them into policy writing.
Policy writing, yeah, thank you so much. Chike, I can see that your hand is up, but then we'll just quickly go into the writing bit of it and then come back to you for maybe your follow-up question. You've already again started to touch on the writing parts. There's some of the questions that we already had here was, how do you decide what to write about? So when you sit down and you want to write a particular article, how do you choose a topic to write about? Is it based on what is happening in the political space, in the current affairs space at the moment? Is it based on ideas that you have? And then you already spoke about negotiating collaborations, this whole thing about co-authoring. Now I'm putting them together because I'd like to see if we can address some of these questions together, even a lump sum. So deciding on what to want to write about. For me, I can share that I only write about things when I feel I have an idea to share with the world. So it's always difficult for me when somebody's asking me to write something, then I really struggle. But typically, I write when I see a particular problem. I see that there's an element of the solution that has not yet been proposed or discussed. I see a gap there, and then I say, okay, let me put my own ideas out there to join the conversation. Co-authoring, negotiating collaborations, how do we get the most out of them, and who should you co-author with? And then even when it comes to the writing itself, like we said, we may not be able to go into the details of how to write policy articles, even down to things like word count. We have a video that already touches on that. But then under that, we have the issue of writing discipline, which is linked to goal setting. So how do you finish what you start, right? Because it's a very difficult thing for writers and researchers. You mentioned that policy writing is shorter than academic writing. In policy writing, you cannot go all over the place. You can't do like a detailed literature review. You can't show all of the different arguments. You really have to stay on topic, because the longer it is, the longer it is, the smaller your audience is growing. So it even starts from 500 words, 800 words, 1,000 words. That's where you know that you have the widest audience. But when you start getting to 1,500, 2,000, 2,500, you're narrowing your audience, and fewer people are going to read it. So you don't have the privilege to do as much as you want. But then how do you now make sure that you have that discipline to finish what you start, that you don't start something and start going all over the place and then you never finish it? How do you overcome writer's block? And then how do you review your work? What are the processes of trying to make sure that you've not just written something that is just your own opinion, and it's not really valid in the space? And then how do you find platforms to publish? Is this too many to lump together, or do you think you'll be able to touch on them at one go?
Yes, I'm trying to nod my head. I will pick the first two and then we'll go over the other ones.
Okay.
So, which I think is the number one thing. How do you identify the things to write? I think every day you wake up, there are things to write about, if only we pay attention. And then there is this thing that scholarly editors, scholars, sometimes they feel like, oh, somebody has covered that area. I always have an objection to that, and the reason is this: knowledge is not exhaustive, and I feel the more we pound on something, the more the message becomes germane to the public. So, for instance, let me give you an example. When COVID-19 came, everybody, all of us. In fact, if you don't link what you are doing to COVID-19, you are not serious. And then I even saw some people on LinkedIn who started saying they were COVID-19 experts. And you wonder, when did we start this? How have people suddenly translated to becoming experts on COVID-19? So everybody was writing on COVID-19, and then it fizzled out. Nobody's talking about it again. But the reality, and something that I think we have dropped the ball, all of us, most people here are Africans. You heard people saying, oh, I think the major lesson that COVID-19 has come to teach us is that it has revealed the weakness in our public health system. So the lesson now is that after COVID-19, we must begin to make investments in public health. So now that COVID-19 has gone, have you seen anybody talking about those things again to say, come, preparedness, pandemic come in cycles. They can come every 10 years, every 50 years, every 100 years. Are we now preparing for the next pandemic? Are we preparing the next generation for the next pandemic? About 2 weeks or 3 weeks ago, what do you call it? Vaccines, worth millions of dollars, were declared expired in Uganda because people were not interested in taking maybe the vaccine. And you know what? The money for that vaccine was actually World Bank loan. So is World Bank going to write off the debt for Uganda? Or have we suddenly now developed that, oh, COVID-19 is mild, so there's no problem? And I used to ask the question, the day another one after the other of Ebola strikes, we might not have that opportunity that we have with the mild COVID-19. So why am I saying this? A lot was written about COVID-19, but nobody's talking about the advocacy post-COVID-19 now to say, government, African government, you were talking about this, that you were going to invest in public health system. COVID-19 has come and it has faded away. How are we now using our writing to bring back this reality to government, to be able to now stay committed to those statements and move beyond rhetorics to actual implementation? Most people here are Africans, and you can answer that for yourself. So I'm saying this to underscore the fact that we need to keep writing, looking at those areas. For instance, you look at the issue of gender mainstreaming in governance. Nigeria performed even below conservative Iran in women representation in government, according to one recent data from StatiSense. So less than 3% according to that data, I think. Iran, conservative Iran, where it is purely Islamic regime, there are more women in government than Nigeria, the so-called liberal Nigeria. So there are things to write about. Look at food security in Africa. We have the arable soil. We have everything, the favorable climate. I was talking to somebody in Norway yesterday, and they told me that everywhere is covered with snow. I said, so what about agriculture? Where are animals living now and all those things? But those things don't happen in Africa. Most African countries are not food sufficient. We need to write about that. We need to write about children out of school. The combined population of out-of-school children in Nigeria is more than Sweden, Denmark, Norway put together. We need to write about that. And this is the reality across Africa. So I'm saying this to say, the more we look at the daily issues that we're dealing with, the more we realize that there are things to write about. Let me talk about artificial intelligence. If you've read about the fourth industrial revolution by Squab, the things I was reading in that book, I began to wonder, like, Africa has not even come out of sleep at all, because they are talking about biotechnology, precision agriculture, artificial intelligence. And when you look at the dinosaurs that are leading African countries, these are things that are outside their purview. So these are things that I think we need to continue to write about, awaken the public to the reality that African countries are still in the 18th century, while the world has moved on into the, other areas in terms of sheer scientific development, knowledge production, so to speak. So these are the things we need to look into our past, read about the things of our past, bring them into contemporary experiences. You also need to look into the things of the future and bring them into practical experiences. So how do you get things to write about? You continue to think about the things that are happening around you, and then you also try to read. There is no any other alternative to this. The more you read, the more you realize that you can even do exploratory writing. So they've written about it in Colombia. Has anybody written about this in Nigeria? Just the same thing. They've written about it in Sierra Leone. Has anybody written about this in Ghana? They've written about this in Uganda. Has anybody written about this in Morocco or Algeria or anywhere, if depending on area of your specialization? So for me, it's the more you read, the more you interact with the daily human experiences, with the inclination that things can be better than this, the more you generate ideas on what to write about. And even as a matter of fact, at some point you become overwhelmed that you don't even know which one to pick again, because you just have a lot of issues, a lot of topic. And for people who find themselves in such scenario like me, what I advise you to do is that now that we're in an era where everybody is having his mobile phone, anything that across your mind, make sure you put it on your note, whether it is on your WhatsApp, where you do your backup, anything whatsoever. That I have a lot of topics that I don't even know when I'm going to revisit them. But don't let any idea that strike you and you consider what writing about, don't let it fizzle out without writing it. If you are the one who is doing journal or doing diary and all those things, whatever crosses your mind that you think is worth researching, put it down. And then one day, you might just be going over it again and the idea strike, and then it becomes the right time to write about it. That is the number one thing. On collaboration, picking people to collaborate with, I think there are no fixations about this. The number one thing is that you need to continue to build your network. Who are the people you follow on Twitter? Who are the scholars or writers that you think you should have area of common interest? Maybe on LinkedIn, or people that you have actually read their work. You can actually collaborate with them. But what is just very, very important is that at the point of collaboration, you must make sure that you are well-served and the other person is also well-served. Well-served in the sense like, Tenny, for instance, is an expert on trade. So maybe I want to do a study on maybe insecurity in West Africa and how that is affecting cross-border trading. So Tenny has an area of interest well situated in the topic that we want to write about as trade. And then as one who is interested in security, I have my interest also well situated there. Very much unlike if I want to write on insecurity in West Africa, and there's nothing linking it to Penny's area of specialization. So she's just coming to maybe invest her energy in things that down the line might not really count much for her on her CV or experience. So it is something that we have to look into. Or you look at somebody that you think has a strong expertise in that area, and then you think he can bring insight, perspective that is going to reinforce what you want to write about. That is also another area. But what is very, very important is that many times you hear things, people inviting you for collaboration, and when you look at the idea, you just realize that, but how does this really contribute to my own overall interest, research interest? So that is very, very important in looking for people to collaborate with. And what I think is also very difficult is that everybody is busy, and we want to be practical with ourselves here. So it's very important that you look at a long-term plan. You wouldn't have conceived an idea maybe for 3 months, and then you come to your collaborator and say, and I want to see if you can actually get this done in the next 2 weeks. The person also has his own agenda, because this is how people now feel like, oh, the person is proud. He's not, but he doesn't even reply my message. I even told him that we should collaborate. Let there be enough time, maybe 3 months, 6 weeks, 6 months, that I'm talking maybe it's a big project now. If there are short articles of 1,000, 1,500, there are things that a reasonable notification of 3 weeks to 4 weeks, I think, should be enough for both parties, since it's a very short article. So there are no established part about this. What I also think is very important is that continuous connection with people, networking with people, then you are able to get people to collaborate with. Collaboration has its advantage. And the reason why I think we should continue to collaborate is that, one, people are able to bring different contextual experiences to bear on the things that you want to write. And along the lines, since we are all young people who are pursuing a career, would-be employers also want to see on your CV that you have actually collaborated with people, that you are not a solo player. So if you try to write with people in multiple areas of expertise, it shows that you're a collaborator, and it's something that you can advertise on your CV to say, I've collaborated with somebody in Ghana, I've worked with, and it also enriches your own experience. For instance, if I pick somebody to work with in Uganda, for instance, now I might have not been to Uganda at all, but along the line, we are able to publish, and I'll put it on my CV that we did a comparative analysis of Uganda and Ghana, whereas I might have not been to the two countries. So it enriches your own experience too. It is possibly maybe when you show up at the interview or anywhere that they are going to know that you have not even been to Uganda, but you have demonstrated expertise by your collaboration in those places.
Yeah.
So I think that,
yeah, I mean, you're very right. I had to learn collaboration the hard way, because I was a solo writer. I love to just write my thing. Even sometimes when there'll be collaboration requests, I'll just write the entire thing and say, don't worry, you can add your name at the end. But then someone told me recently that so they went to look at a list of my publications, and they said, how come you're the one that's authoring all of these and there's no like co-authorship? And I said, what's wrong with that? And they said, actually, it's a bad look in the academic space when they see that you're always writing on your own. It can work against you. So you being able to work with others, and share expertise and even come up with writing projects together is a good thing. There's also the fact that we have different networks. So there was an article that I pitched to the World Economic Forum that I wanted to write. And then when they responded, they said, yes, that they'd like me to write it for them, but that they want me to co-author with somebody in their office. So somebody from WEF. And I was like, which one concerned me with people in your office? I said, I want to write something. Why do you want to jump on this thing? So it was a little bit initially irritating, annoying to me, because I was thinking, you guys just want to benefit from this thing that I want to write on. But then I realized that was not the way to look at it. So my network is very different from the network of the person that I was going to co-author with. So it even expands also the reach of your writing, because when you work on it together, it enriches it, it strengthens it. The ideas are stronger. And then even when it's published, it's being disseminated to both of your networks or to the multiple networks, depending on who. So just before we move into the next step, which is going to be talking about some more about writing in terms of the writing discipline, and then a question by Fatiha, I'll invite the two people that have questions to ask their questions. So back to back. Chigo, you can ask your question first, and then after you, Victoria, you can ask a question, and then we'll address the questions together. If that's okay with you, Wally. Okay, so Chigo, over to you.
Yes, thank you so much, Tenny, and thank you so much, Dr. Wale, for this. I really have enjoyed the session. It has been very informative. I'm the person that asked a question about, the difference between policy writing and academic writing, and your answer was really clear. Balancing between simple readership and reach, accessibility, and all that. I do have, I'm in the energy and extractive sector. I do have a master's degree in international energy and 7 years of work experience there, but I'm still considering, doing a PhD before starting to write. It might be an excuse, but I think with what you said, I'll like dip my toe in the water and probably start. But my question is, there's so many, policy articles these days on different journals, blogs, etc. How do you set your writing apart from the flood of articles that exist? And secondly, you mentioned, AI, but AI also has an impact on policy writing. We have the advent of ChatGPT and other tools that may help or hinder, depending on how you look at it, creativity and innovation in the writing space. What is your point of view on AI and policy writing? Thank you so much.
All right, thank
Kenny,
you.
let me quickly answer this question, please.
Well, are you sure? Is it quickly?
Yes. I will
Okay,
quickly address the question because I'm also trying to write the question down. So, how do you set your writing apart? I think the best thing is to continue to reinvent yourself, read wide, and then make sure that you get your facts and figures right. Providing data to back up your argument in such write-up. And then there is really no special skill really because you come to a point that you write and people come to party at the back that, oh, you write a fantastic paper. And sometimes you pick some other people's article and you feel like, where is this person operating a different brain? Because you just wonder that the quality of thinking that goes into that. I don't know, maybe you feel it like I feel sometimes when I see some people who really write excellently. So I think the key is just to continue to reinvent yourself. Read top-notch articles that are going to also help to reframe the way you think about the things that you write. I do that a lot, and I think it has also helped the way I frame my thoughts, the way I express myself, and then the way the outcome is received on the long run. The one on AI is very, very important, and this question, that's the reason why I quickly want to address it. I think we are getting to a point now that it's going to be a double-edged sword. So nobody can determine or define how it's going to be. But one of the key areas that I think is going to AI is going to affect is also writing, and it's both for positive and negative. Gone are the days in which people can go to plagiarize people's ideas and thoughts, and they are probably going to go scot-free. Those softwares, even before we start talking about this AI thing, have been available. And then I've also got it to the point that I think some people are now using AI to write. And then you've seen that some journals now say, in fact, I've seen a journal article in which they listed authors and they listed artificial intelligence. It's a very blurred area now because attribution becomes very difficult. And then if the person writes something defamatory or something that is injurious to the society, how do we sue the AI? So I think it's something that is very, very difficult to navigate now, that we just have to navigate carefully. And for us as writer, the reason why I said it's a very, very serious area is that I think we are getting to the point that people might begin to suspend their brain for rethinking and relying on AI to actually write for them. So it's a blurred line that has to be carefully navigated with a deep sense of responsibility. I've stumbled on some platform or some software that I just feel like, oh, I don't want to talk about this with people because, some people cannot draw that line that they must not cross responsibly. So you have students that possibly maybe they will not be writing dissertation again because AI is probably going to revolutionize those areas. So we're getting to the point that I think human beings are tempted to give up on their cognitive thinking and outsourcing their thinking to machines. And then we might end up with a robotic society in which everybody is a zombie. I don't know whether we're still going to be around at that time. But if you look at the sheer conversation that is going on in the world now, I think globally, there's a need for a balancing act so that as we leverage the advantages of AI, we also don't get to the point that we completely neglect our human capability, reasoning and everything, and outsource that to machine. So that's where we are now. And I think for us as writers, what is very, very important is to hold ourselves to higher ethical standards in terms of what we write and in terms of what we do. It's going to be very, very important so that we don't get to a point that the thoughts that run the society are what are actually generated from machines that are not human, who don't have emotion, who don't have empathy, and then the whole world just fall apart. So writers have a key responsibility to play in this, in framing all this that are actually happening now, and ensuring that we don't get to the point that it is AI that is actually doing the whole of our writing and thinking for us.
Exactly. Yeah, I think actually at some point we're going to do a session on AI in policy writing because we can't run away from it. And then there's the fact that, when it comes to AI in terms of the LLMs, large language models, it's not even necessarily their thinking. It's just what has already been written out there in the past. They're just reorganizing it for you. So it's also the question of, how much new knowledge is going to come out of that. But then we can't run away from it. There is a way to use it to increase productivity, but there are wrong ways to use it and there are right ways to use it. But then it's something that we can touch on later. So I want to quickly invite Victoria to ask your question. Victoria, over to you.
Hi, Tenny. Thank you so much. Thank you, Doc, and every other person for the session. It's really been very insightful. I have a question around the structure of the policy paper. And this is coming from a place of, writing for people who necessarily might not have so much time to go through all of the gibberish that you throw in a paper. And I don't have so much experience in this space. And, even though I've been writing informally for the longest time, I'm actually switching over to education policy. And it's something that I've been thinking about. I have like this huge paper I need to write for UNICEF at the moment. And I have been staring at the paper for like 1 month because I feel like I don't have the right approach to the paper. While there's a way to go around academic writing, I also know that for policy, beyond just identifying the problems and all, you also want to take it through certain lenses of, just certain lenses generally. So I just want to know if there's like a structure to approach it. I think that would really help. And then also if there are like certain things that one should look out for when putting together a policy paper as well. Thank you. Over.
All right. Well, just before you come in, so now Victoria's question is speaking to the next comment, the next the next things that I would like you to comment on, which is the writing process, writing discipline. So how do you finish what you start? If you'd share your own process for planning your articles, briefly, and then writing discipline, how maybe you can share some tips with us, in terms of how you've overcome writer's block. It's a very serious thing. I myself sometimes struggle with pieces for a long time. Maybe stories about projects that you struggled through. And then the next segment there is reviewing your work. So even when you write it, how do you send to others? So in addressing her question, you can touch on these things. And also Fatiha's question on sources of data, of research, just, very, very briefly. Thank you. Then Ese will come back to you after this, this bunch of comments. Yeah.
Yes, structure of the policy paper. I think it depends on so many things. One, she just mentioned UNICEF. It might be very important to see, some of them might give you a terms of reference on what they want to see. So, and then if they don't do that, I believe for such established organization or any organization, they will also have similar documents or papers that they've written in the past or that people consultants have submitted for them. So that can be a good guide to know what they actually expect from you. But in a sense in which maybe all these are not available, I think what is very, very important are the same thing that we learn in our regular postgraduate studies. What is the problem? Framing the issues, the problem identification. And then, of course, before you get to that point, you are going to have some sort of introduction. For me, when I write, particularly a major paper, the last thing I write is introduction, because my idea is that the introduction is introducing the entire paper, the entire structure of the paper. So even though that is the first day that you see in a paper, it is the last day that I write, because for me, it's what introduces and talk about the layout of the argument in the paper, the objective, the goal, why the paper is written. And for any policy writing, that is also very, very key, that introduction. So for me, of course, before you get to the introduction, you are going to have the executive summary. That is what most of those guys are going to read. from that, particularly if it's a lengthy one. So that executive summary, which in scholarly paper they call summary of findings, is very, very key. And the executive summary put everything together from introduction to the last concluding statement. So for me, generally, you look at the executive summary for a policy paper. Then you move to the introduction. And then from the introduction, you try to discuss what the problem is. Oh, there are 30 million out-of-school children. What is the repercussion if we don't do A, B, C, D? And that forms the reason why we think we should go into this. And in that problem statement, if they have been recruited to armed groups, it's important to stress that the disadvantage that is created for the larger society, if we don't do nothing, those are part of the issues that will come under the problem statement. And then the actual discussion of the findings, when maybe you interview people or you draw on literature here and there, maybe a comparative analysis, and also sharing of example of areas where things have worked, bringing all those together is very, very key for them to be able to think globally and act locally on the issues that you have identified for them, so that they see, for instance, if we are talking about school feeding project, where it has worked in Brazil, you bring it to bear. And then after all those problem statement identification and the discussion that follow, then it goes to the recommendation, which is very, very key for policy makers. So that area, you have to itemize them, particularly the way I write my recommendation. If it is something that a number of actors have to act on those recommendations. So I have a recommendation session for the government, and not just for government generally. If there is a particular agency of government that has a duty of care, you bring it out to say, Ministry of Public Health, these A, B, C, D are things that they should do. The civil society that are campaigning for inclusion or maybe for marginalization or for good governance, these are things that they need to do. If there's a role, even within that big umbrella of civil society organization for the media, educating the general public, you bring it out and you segment it. It is not just to say government generally. If there is a role that the communities are supposed to play, you bring it out. So it gives the would-be implementers of those recommendations the broader view of the arrays of actors who have the duty to actually act on those recommendations. So I take again the executive summary, the introduction, the problem statement identification, and then the discussion of the findings and recommendation. I think those are very, very key. How do you finish what you start? You see, one of the myths of writing is that people say there's no time. So if you have time to do WhatsApp, if you have time to do Twitter, if you have time to do Facebook, if you have time to do LinkedIn, which I also do, and I think I'm not like people like Tenny who are more disciplined with WhatsApp. In fact, when people come to me and say, we always see you online, I used to ask myself that maybe I'm really lazy, really, if they are always seeing me online. So if you have time to do all those things, you also have time to talk. If you have time to do your private conversation with friends and everybody, we all have time to write. The only thing is that what is lacking is that discipline of commitment. And the starting point is to carry the laptop and start writing. As the thing is coming to your mind, you start writing. I've also encountered people that they talk and you feel like, so all these things that you are saying, why are you not putting it in the public domain? Say, no, there's no time to write. I don't even have time to write at all. I mean, people who express brilliant ideas about some of the challenging problems that we are facing. You are talking to them, and then I've asked, I said, so why are you not writing about these things? There's no time. So for me, the solution for such people is that get your tape recorder, your recording mechanism, whether it is your phone or whatever. As those things are coming from your mind, start saying it, start saying them. And then at some point, there are transcription software, or maybe when you listen to yourself, you can now write. It helps you to program your thought. Some organizations are exiting Nigeria recently. Anybody that's conversant with industry and trade development in the country. And I spoke to a very senior sales manager in one of the big companies in Nigeria. We talked about the remote things that I didn't even know about, the reason why some of those challenges came up in those companies and they have to exit. How they are hiring expatriates that they are putting in Banana Island, in high-profile places, and they have to incur cost in those places. So when we finished the conversation, I said, so why are you not writing about this thing and maybe get a newspaper to publish it as a column? Said there's no time at all. So he did the recording, sent it to one junior assistant in the office. That one transcribed it. What he said in about 18 minutes, was enough for a short article in the newspaper. So for me, these are ways to go about it. If you have found out that you are the one who express yourself better when you are vocal, when you are talking, then start using the gadgets that you have available for you. The challenge is that a lot of people have answers to our problems, but they are not writing. If you write, your writing can go far. It can get to Australia, it can get to Jamaica, it can get to Haiti. But the things that you talk is just with you, like the dream of the drug that reside in the dog. So it's important that you will begin to take advantage of technology. I think those are some of the ways to finish what you start as a conceptualization, and then the discipline to actually write. And I'm not going to be the one that is going to tell you that writing is easy. It's at the risk of maybe scaring people anyway. It's a tough thing, but one thing is that once you have started, you continue to develop yourself, you continue to form that habit, and with the discipline of maybe waking up when others are sleeping, or waking up early or sleeping late here and there, you know, not that it begins to really tell on your head anyway. You need to find a way to just continue to write, and you must be passionate and encourage yourself when people pass good comment about the things that you write. Oh, fine. So those are some of the things that come, and then finding, I don't know, maybe Penny is still going to talk about this, but let me quickly talk about it. When you write, the advantages that come are much more than when you keep those things to yourself. No advantage even come at all. When EndSARS struggle was going on in Nigeria, I put up something and I contacted somebody who has written for Brookings Institutions in the US, because I think it's something that the global audience should know about, even though it has been reported in so many ways. And then it was my first time, and the standard was very high. And the lady threw away everything, said, oh, these things are already in the public domain. The media have written about these. And the only thing that saved that article was just a line like, okay, if you can expand on this line, I think you can build your argument on that. The article was actually going into the trash bin. It is that line that saved it. And you know, because I was struggling, I want to have my feet in, I want to also publish on a elite platform where people read it across the world. So I took to advice, and then I built the argument around those that little line that saved it, deleting maybe more than 800 words and having to start all over again. And then I went on the LinkedIn to share when the article was published, we did more than 29 email of back and forth to publish 1,000-word article. It was the most strenuous experience I've had in my life. And then I realized that to really get into some places, you need to do extra work, not like maybe your national newspaper that will not even bother to cross the T's and the I's and all those things. So I put it on the LinkedIn, and in less than 24 hours, a professor contacted me from Harvard to say a conference is coming up in the fall of 2022, I think, or maybe 2023, and we are talking about global militarization of police, Black freedom, and international solidarity. Will you be available to speak on the platform? I said, what? Just publishing this article. Then Harvard is inviting. And then after everything, we did the presentation and everything. Before COVID-19, they actually used to bring their presenter to Harvard. So it was in that, so I would have been there. And then they paid me some few dollars, you know, in the process of having. So these are some of the things. I can't count how many emails I've received that we read your work. So you are opening the doors for yourself, even as you are solving society's problem. And if there's anything that all of us need, is that you want to become a thought leader in certain areas, and you want to be saying that you are not just a local voice, you're also a global champion in your field. So a lot of people have things in their hearts that they are not writing about. The more you are not writing about those things, you are depriving the society of important solutions to our challenges, and also depriving yourself of further opportunities that can come later. Review your work. It's very important to have people you can pass your work to, who are going to pass honest comment, brutal comment at times, not because you are friends. I have a friend that I'm afraid of his critique. I don't like his critique at all, because it's like he's going to throw. And the funny thing is that he doesn't write. You have people like that in your mind of mind, you just telling them that if it is that easy, why are you not writing? He doesn't write. Up until yesterday, I still told him that when you are doing this PhD, I will advise that you write a book out of this. He said that is not his plan. People have their plan, of course, but he's one of the most deep thinkers that I know when it comes to critiquing something and the way he looks at things. So you find out that, in fact, some of the objective critiques that you are going to get are going to come from people who don't write, who are scared of writing. But you know, when they pick their pen, when they look at what you write, they are going to give you their honest comment, and you begin to look at, okay, maybe I should look at. So you should have people like that who review your work from time to time. There is a blind spot you are not going to see. In fact, even if it is grammar, if you write it, you won't see it until somebody look at the things, look at the content for you. So it's very, very important to have such people. And how do you get those people? Is also by building networks. So don't joke with LinkedIn, don't joke with your Twitter, the people that you connect with in those places. Sources of data, many sources. It depends on what you are writing on. For instance, if you you have World Bank that has data, you have IMF, you have all these data sources, the United Nations, IOM, a lot of them have data on WHO, on so many things that we want to research. So there's that secondary data that is available at multi-level of organization. And then if it is also very possible, whatever you're writing is also good to listen to people who operate in that context. You might not need to quote them, but they provide insights. And this is qualitative data at times in terms of the dimension and how those things are playing out. So you're writing on COVID-19, for instance, or you're writing on public health issues. It's very important to deal with people who have been dealing with that particular problem maybe for more than 10 years. They are going to provide some insight. You might not consider that to be data in the real sense of it, but it's a useful information that can be leveraged upon. So there's a lot of data out there, a lot of data, and some organizations are coming up. If you're writing on anti-corruption, Budget in Nigeria has a whole gamut of data in that regard, data fight, a lot of organizations, and even if it is at continental level, like my organizations that I'm working with, Institute for Security Study, there's Africa Future that is purely on quantitative data about the past, the contemporary, and the future directions of each of these countries in Africa. So if you go to ISF's website or you Google Africa Future at Institute for Security Studies, there's data on every country. Every country. There is a major project in the organization. And it's not just data, it's on data on almost everything that has to do with human development. The beauty of data is that if you're able to use data in your writing, it also helps to give credibility to the things that you are talking about, not just hearsay or figment of private or personal imagination.
Okay. Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you so much, Wole, for those. I mean, just to add to what you've said, too, when it comes to finding data or finding studies to reference, it's almost like a never-ending journey or like a never-ending tunnel, because when you find one paper that is talking about the topic that you're trying to write about, go to the reference list and you see that they've cited a number of other papers and databases that you can then also go to find more stuff. And then when you go to another paper from that first paper, go to the reference list again, you see even more papers, more databases. And that's how I found a lot of key databases that are not very popular, because I found that they were quoted or referenced in a particular paper. And I said, oh, this actually even exists, and then had to now go and find it, because there are many things that you may not find from a normal Google search. But then in the former webinar that we had, we touched a bit on how to find sources. So again, we're going to link that video. And in terms of writing discipline, it's also good to know what your writing process is over time. Do you write better in the morning, in the evening? Are you able to write when there's a lot of noise around you, or you need a quiet place? And then now build that into your system. So if you need to wake up early, which in my case is often what works for me. If I wake up by 3 a.m. and I need to finish something, I can write it from 3 a.m. to 8 a.m. Or just know what works for you and build that into your writing process. Reviewing your work is very important. And like Wole said, it goes upwards and downwards. So upwards to the people that are experts in the space that you're writing on, to just make sure that you're not missing any of the key things you're supposed to be thinking about. And also downwards in terms of the people that you want to read what you're writing. So they need to be able to confirm that it is accessible, that it is understandable, and that you're really hitting the targets that you're trying to reach. So upwards in terms of the expertise and closing the gaps there, and downwards in terms of like just verifying that the people that you're trying to reach, the audience you're trying to reach, can actually understand what you're writing. So we'll move to the 2 questions again, quickly from Ese and from Trigo, and then from there we will go into the next and sort of like concluding section about research impact when it comes to writing. So over to you, Ese, first of all.
Thank you, Tenny, and thank you, Dr. Wole. This has been very interesting. The first question I had, or rather my first observation, or I think it's a question, sorry. You know, when you talked about the thing around earlier with, you know, not sharing some information you had around like with predatory journals. I'm someone who has done research up to PhD level, and a bone of contention till tomorrow that I have with my supervisor was with my master's thesis and my PhD thesis, because of what or how I want it to be published or how I want to share the information, right? And because I know from my undergraduate level, the research I did, and then while working as a graduate assistant, some of the research I contributed to, they were not like, it's not work like now that I am more informed, I felt proud about. So I sort of left it. And so by the time I had done my master's and my PhD, I was like, okay, this is valuable information that I know I want to send out. So an average paper in the kind of journals you like take between 2 to 3 years, just from when you send it in, you know, the back and forth. So that was one of the things that I said, okay, I don't know if this interests me. So which is why I got interested in exploring policy writing. So it's something that I know I want to do, but you know, there's that if you want to work in academia, you sort of are expected to have those publications. So I don't know what you would suggest or say in terms of how to handle that. Okay, you know you have to get published, but also you would rather publish in this other format. That's my first question. The second one, you had mentioned about reconciling the information you share with the policy demand of the day. So I'd really like to know, like, where do you sort of get the policy demand of the day? Just if I'm trying to draft a policy article, how do I know what like my stakeholders are interested in? Or is it just, as you said, you frame your thinking around these are some solutions like you should already be doing? So that is already a demand of the day. I'd really like just clarity on that. How do you reconcile? How do you know what that demand is? Because just because you think something is a problem and maybe people in your circle complain around it, doesn't necessarily mean, at least using the Nigerian context, the policymakers are interested in it most of the time. So, you know, it's that concern around, I liked the example you gave where you can be writing for 10 years and meanwhile, one person just has to have one conversation and that opens, right? So how do you, like maybe while you're writing any policy article, it's sort of, I'm putting it out there, I'm making the noise and I'm hoping it sticks. So where do you decide what is the policy of the day and how do you manage ensuring it ties into the objective or interests of the existing government as at that time? And my final question, sorry, is I don't know, maybe this is to turn it to if they're like recommended policy writing resources, maybe because I like to read. So even if it's just a compilation of maybe like guidelines, videos, articles. I think if Aloinett advises us, just something that can help us learning, I think that would be really cool. It could be a Word doc or a PowerPoint slide or something on the website. I think just having access to that compilation would really help. And the final one would be, I don't know if this session is like it's open to everyone. So if it is, I think I would like the idea of either it's being hosted on YouTube or on LinkedIn, because I feel that would definitely. So it's because I know Tanya, I saw it on Twitter. But I know there's a way this would have been more easier, like sort of to get us to also share to our professional network. I know LinkedIn has, I attend a lot of these sessions there. So I would suggest considering how to incorporate it either on LinkedIn and YouTube. So that thing you said, you don't know who would see it and then who can share it. I think that would really help all of us. And to be a good way, if I want to stalk Dr. Wale, before remembering to write his name, I can already just go to his profile while on the conversation. But this has been like really fantastic, and thank you so much.
Yes, thank you so much.
Yes, well, let's just take Chugo as well, so that we'll take them together. Yeah.
Okay, it's all right.
Thank you so much. Just echoing the previous comment that this has been really insightful. I have quite a simple question on a platform for publication. I know we've run the gamut here. We've talked about like WEF. I know Tenny mentioned WEF. Dr. Wale, you mentioned ELIC publications like Brookings and others. where should we target publications? Because I know in the beginning, there are different avenues where you can first and foremost publish free. You have like Medium, you have different research institutes, you have research hubs, you have these blogs, you have people reaching out to you to write stuff, but for just to write. Now, is it better to target high impact or elite publications, or is it better to start with like smaller ones or hubs, or just publishing like freelancing on Medium and other sites like that? And then I had a question on data collection, and thank you for sharing the link to ISS like Futures. But I did a fellowship on climate in Africa and how to implement climate policies. And I wanted to write an article after that. But even asking for data, people expect to be paid to give feedback. Is this normal? Or should we just avoid looking for qualitative data from people and just focus on the data that's already published? Thank you so much.
All right, so Wale, thank you for that, Trigo. So to answer these two questions, I think they link very well to the concluding part of this discussion, which is already on publishing. So how do you find a platform to publish? How do you approach the platform? And how do you decide which platform is the best for what you're trying to write? When I was doing my fellowship in Florence, we were supposed to write a policy brief for the university, which is the European University Institute. We're also supposed to write an article that was going to be published in Italian newspapers. And I decided not to, because I said, well, what I'm trying to say, it doesn't really concern an Italian audience. I'm going to be wasting my time. So the precise article that I wrote at that time, I took it to ISS instead, because it was ISS that had the audience that I was looking for. So how do you even select the platforms? And then how do you publicize your work? Because after it's published, that's not where it stops. Many platforms do not promote the articles that they publish. They would say you as a writer should promote it yourself. So how do you make sure that it gets into the spaces that it needs to get into, which is linked to what Ase was asking? Because as much as we write, we need also access to policymakers. Sometimes maybe I write something on the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. I check my phone for who is the special advisor in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and I send to them and I say, can you get this to the minister? You know, I know you people are very close, so I need them to have their eyes on this. So how do we maximize the impact of our work? And then featuring in the media, you already mentioned this earlier on, but then how many times we get media requests, right, based on our writing. But sometimes you even have to be proactive when you do something that you feel is very important and you want it to even, you want to expand the reach. Sometimes you have to approach media houses and send to them and say, there's this thing that I just published. I think you should be talking about it. And I think that you should invite me to talk about it. So if you can address the questions, you know, also with this concluding remarks, you know, publicizing your work and then featuring in the media. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tenny. A lot of brilliant questions. Let me quickly appreciate everyone that this is quite a learning curve for me for the engagement. And then I'm very, very grateful because it's also an opportunity to learn from all these brilliant questions. Let me start from the reverse, then to the first question. Media request. You know, we do a lot. And I believe one of the strong levers through which we can get our output to those who need our message is actually by leveraging the relationship with the media. There is no better way to go about this. You can talk, you can write, but the traction that you can gain from just 4 or 5 minutes of media, all your publications in a year might not be able to bring it to you. So I'm saying this, that anyone that is interested in policy engagement, policy writing, should also take conscious efforts to build relationship with the media. So at some point, I decided to look at media handles of some influential journalists covering West Africa, for instance, or covering Africa. And I started following their Twitter handle. Some will follow back. And then the beauty that differentiates LinkedIn from Twitter is that there is an organic connection. So if I send you a friend request and you accept, it's quite different from the Twitter, in which it might be flowing just in one direction, that you are the one seeing what the person is posting while the person is not seeing what you are posting. So I think we have to be deliberate and strategic about that in terms of actually connecting with actors in the media. So they see what you publish, they see what you write. And when such need arises, you become a thought leader that they are going to come to. So it's very, very important that we have to be deliberate about that media. And then at some point when the relationship has been built, you don't go after them again. They are the ones that will be coming after you. And that is what my home media engagement look like in these days. I'm not looking for people to say, let me come and speak on your platform. They come to me. And, you know, it's come from one recommendation. In fact, major medias in the world that are featured like BBC and CNN, the person that connected me to those platforms has never invited me for one interview to date. So a friend in Nairobi connected him to me. I want to share practical experience so that we are not just talking theory. So a friend in Nairobi connected him to me to say he wants to know about the separatist violence that is going on in Southwest and Northwest Cameroon, that he should talk to me. Then we exchanged contact and the interview never come. So then during the coup in Niger, of course, I've been speaking on BBC before that time. During the coup in Niger, I just started receiving calls from VOA from everywhere, India, Iran, and all those things. And I was wondering what's going on here. So when I spoke to the guy in VOA, he told me, he said, somebody actually put your number on our platform because the media, foreign media network, they have a platform of WhatsApp in Africa. So that was where the calls are coming and all those things. And I was granted those interviews. And most of the times, let me also say, because it is a symbiotic relationship, it's feeding on each other. There are times that the media request is no area that you are passionate, you are not really interested in talking about. But you do it because you want to foster a relationship for the day that you will also need them to say, I just published this thing on the nexus of trade and investment or trade and insecurity in West Africa. I think you should talk about it. Because you have obliged the person to talk about election, you have obliged the person to talk about climate change, that day, it will also be obliged to look for a slot in which they can probably slot into their news. So it is very, very important that you look at that as a give and take relationship. It's not only going to come your own way. There are times that I used to force them because part of my reporting is that quarterly, I should report on the media interviews that I've granted. So there are times that I will talk to the people that the real interview you should be interviewing me for is on organized crime. All these things, I can't go and report them. You know, okay, to say, okay, we'll look for a time where we see a germane issue about organized crime and we'll talk about it. So you have to carefully manage the relationship with the media so that it is both beneficial. Paying for data, is it normal to access data? I think it's neither here nor there. It also depends on what you want to do. When we were working on anti-corruption in Nigeria, I know a state government in Nigeria that for budget, our partner then to be able to get access to their data, budget rather, because they wanted to do a comparative analysis or compilation of subnational budget in Nigeria. They had to pay the state 15,000 naira. Anyway, it's maybe a small money. Not the state, really. Is it the person that is sitting on the data that needs to be? So I'm not going to say whether I'm going to encourage you to go and be paying for data. But, you know, sometimes it's just something that we have to carefully navigate to consider what is the demand like? How pressing do I need this data? Is there alternative means of securing this data? Or maybe I just say, I mean, I go for meetings and then to be able to get access to some of these people in corridor of power, in public policy corridor, they will say, let us meet in the evening to have a drink. You have to go. Sometimes, like my organization, where you do that kind of thing, you can't come and claim money for beer or for stout or for whatever. But those people drink those things. I don't drink them. And I have to pay for my pocket. You know, you are building relationship. It's a balancing act. I'm not going to encourage somebody to do what you don't like to do, but always put a check to know that, okay, I'm still within a moderate limit. Because some things, sometimes it's not going to come easy. So it's neither here nor there. I'm not going to pay 1 million naira, $1,000 to access any data from anywhere. I would rather drop the publication. I don't think it's that compulsory. But you weigh the balance. I think that is the modest answer that I will give. Where should we target for publication? I think it's a two-way thing. One, as much as we want to be seen as global thought leader on this particular subject, you also have to know that as an organic scholar, you have your primary constituency to serve, and that is your immediate environment. For somebody like me, my primary constituency is Nigeria, and then Africa by extension. I know that there are a lot of problems in my country. There are a lot of problems in Africa, and I'm comfortable providing solutions to African problems, not necessarily talking about what is happening in Ukraine or what is happening in Gaza, except it relates to what is unfolding in Africa. So you have, as scholars, as writers, let us keep that to our hearts, that we have a primary constituency to serve. But in doing that, you also want to be seen as a thought leader on the global platform. So I will say it's both ways. Look for opportunities. There are things that recommend that it is for Nigerian government. Why not look for platforms in Nigeria? And for everybody listening to me, the starting point is to be a columnist. That is the starting point. It might be one monthly. It doesn't have to be a weekly thing. Even if it is one monthly in your own area of interest, just make sure that you are consistent with that. And newspapers are in continuous search of people who can continue to provide this incisive analysis on a given subject. So that is the starting point. And when you've done that on a national level, like the examples that I've given when I wrote on NSAS, I am also very desirous to be able to be reckoned with in my area of interest on global platform. So you have to consciously look for those places on global platform. The challenge is that a lot of them put your writing behind paywall. What that does is that you have shielded away African audience that might be your primary target. But, you know, as much as you need this African target, you also need external stakeholders to also engage on such issues. So what you have written, you weigh it. Where should I take this to? That people are actually going, that is going to be beneficial for the people that need it. So that decision is yours. What I've tried to do is that I balance it. So I write scholarly article for journals that are seated in the global north, and then they put it behind paywall, 35 pounds, 35 euro, and all those things. And I summarize the article into 1,000 words and take it to conversation or take it to LSE. Penny is the one that introduced me to LSE. So when you have done that, you have been able to still get the message across to the people, even though not in the old gamut of the paper that has been published. There's no paper that I publish that I don't try to summarize for 1,000 words for outlets that can publish it, and it will be freely accessible to everybody. So I've consciously developed that relationship and that strategy to get my work out. So I remember I published an article that I linked the climate change crisis in the Sahel to pastoralism and the whole conflict issues. And then, you know, when I write that kind of a piece, it's an advocacy piece. And I see myself more of somebody that is trying to advocate for changes through my writing. I'm not necessarily interested in proving whether the theory is valid or not in my context. So I wrote that article, and then somebody from Norwegian Refugee Council, maybe about 6 months down the line from Ireland in Dublin, wrote me and said they are doing something like this for their work in, I think in Sudan or maybe Djibouti, in East Africa, that can I advise? So we scheduled a team meeting of about 30 minutes or thereabout, and I talked to them the way I think about it. So you find a situation in which you wrote on the Sahel, but they are now extrapolating your expertise, your competence, and then your recommendations for application in other contexts. So that is why it is good to write. Most times when you write and publish in those places, you don't get liked, but people are reading. The person that wrote me from North Dublin didn't do a like or anything. So don't be discouraged about the number of likes or and all those things. The work is getting to the people that it's supposed to get to. So it's important to just try to cultivate both the local and national platform. And then recommending policy writing resources, I think Tenny has
we're going to touch on that.
Address that. And how do you know the demand for the stakeholders? I think the number one thing is, one, like as I am here now, every 6 p.m. I listen to Politics Today. I want to know, because I'm away, I want to know what are the issues that are going on in the country, which is my primary constituency. And then I also try to read newspapers widely, because that is the only way not to get lost in what is actually happening. So you can know the major issues that people are talking about, and you look for entry point to also add your your conversation to that. The challenge is that a lot of people are in Canada, a lot of people are in US and all these places, and they don't put their ears to the ground. They are only tweaking things on Twitter and all those places. You have to make a conscious effort to be reading the national dailies from your country as much as possible, even if it is two news, or you don't need to read everything, but just to have a broader view of what is going on in the country and have a major show maybe on TV or radio that you listen to regularly. And the first question about predatory journals and then where to look for review, publishing in top flight journals. For me, I think it's a two-way thing. And I used to tell people jokingly that the reason why I'm writing is because I work in the NGO. Maybe tomorrow there will be no funding again for the work that we are doing. I want to make sure that I have a lot of academic papers that I can dust my CV and go and be lecturing in the university, because they will still need my service. And so you know, you must have the political, I'm not just doing all these things for the sake of doing it. I have to be strategic about my future. So if I'm able to pull maybe like 50 academic papers together, I think universities should be able to consider me for teaching. And then, because you have to look at the balancing of everything that you are doing. So it's the reason why I'm taking my time to write when I have the strength. There's a certain age threshold that I don't see myself doing this kind of thing again. And I believe everyone should have such career plan. So in terms of the question about what some people, in fact, I have a whole, maybe you have also seen it, there is a whole lot of arguments that people are making that, no, you can't call them predatory journals because they are the ones making knowledge available to the people and all those things. But the truth of the matter is that one day you want to go for Fulbright fellowship as a scholar, and then you put those predatory journals together, nobody's going to take you serious. They don't see top flight journals on your list of CV and all those things. So I know it's very difficult, particularly for the scholars and the academics that are listening to this kind of program. Just yesterday, I received 2 rejections, and the first paper was actually sent April 2022. After the 3rd review, they still rejected it yesterday. Those are times that you don't feel comfortable, you feel used and dejected, and you have to carry your paper elsewhere. In fact, I have a paper that I submitted, it was 19 months after that they came back to me to say, oh, they have not, because I even thought the paper is actually useless since it has been rejected in multiple places. So 19 months after, they resuscitated it and they brought it back, and then it was published in the top flight journal. The challenge with Global South researchers, scholars, writers is that we are shortchanged because we don't have enough platform where we can publish our ideas. And then the global reckoning is with those top flight journals that are based in Europe, US, and all these places. So 2 things, we continue to endure the shame, the rigor, the challenges, until maybe we are able to break through with some sufficient journals from the Global South that can also compete with their peers in the Global North. But for scholars, you can't run away from it. I think it's part of the reality. Sometimes it comes out very dirty, very, like, you feel useless, like maybe you have not done anything. But for me, I would not suggest, because of the future that lies ahead of us as young and emerging scholars and writers, that then we should now say because it takes 2 or 3 years to be able to publish in those places, then maybe we should begin to publish in lower level grade journals. I don't think it's contributing to the long.
All right. Thank you so much, Wale. I mean, I think you've addressed all of those questions very well. So we're getting to the end of this webinar, this workshop. We're going to take your questions, Satina and Alex, just in a bit. But then from what we've been discussing so far, we've already touched on thought leadership and how to really build that from everything that Wale has said. And we've also touched on how to sort of like keep to your goals for 2024. Although, Wale, I would also invite you to comment on that as your concluding statement. But then at our end, as people have pointed out at Aloinett Advisors, we know that last year when we did this workshop, there was a request for some sort of writing community and even a request for peer review of writing articles. So I cannot read everyone's articles. Wale cannot review everyone's articles, but then we can read each other's articles. So what we've done is to create a WhatsApp community at the moment. It's going to be very peer-led. So there we're going to invite you to join the community and then even also encourage you to pair up in terms of keeping each other accountable for your writing goals and then reading each other's work and then just sharing generally. Our own role in that community will be to share resources like has been mentioned here. So resources on writing and things that come up. For example, for those that are in London or in the UK, there is an event coming up at the University of Oxford on how to reach policymakers with your research. It's an in-person event. So when we see things like that, we can share on that group. So Ida, I think you can share the link to the group now in the chat. And then Satina, I'd invite you to ask a question. After Satina, we have Alex, and then Wale. When you address a question, it would also be about general tips for reaching our goals in 2000 and I'm seeing that I wrote in 2021, in 2024. Yes, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Tani. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Mr. Oluwole, for the session. So I just want to quickly ask, what's the end goal for policy writing? I would say that I have only written one policy paper, and that was because it was a requirement for an application, and I know I struggled a lot trying to write that paper. And then aside writing and publishing, and like Mr. Oluwole has said, there are other things that comes with it, like getting invited to speak at some forums and all that. What is the end goal of policy writing? Is it to ensure that those policies or the policies you've outlined, your proposals are being implemented? And when they don't get implemented, how do you move past that stage, to keep writing and, nothing is affected? And also I also wanted to ask, do you have at Aloinett Consulting, do you have other paid policy writing classes? Because for me, it's something I want to go into. So I would appreciate every training, paid trainings and all that I can get. Do you have professional trainees that are certified and, span for a longer period of time that you can provide one-on-one guidance? So those are my questions.
Thank you. We can now hear from Alex.
Hello, Tenny, and thank you very much, Dr. Oluwole. So my question is simple and straightforward. So I worked at the National Assembly, Tenny. I knew you when you were working with at the National Assembly. So I just want to ask if I beg your pardon. Okay, so with the end goal of having policy writing become a bill, or at least a motion, is the process different? Because this conversation centers around the end goal being publishing and hoping that policymakers will see it, big media outlet and what have you. But what about with the outright goal to lobby it, or perhaps an organization that has a connect, or lawmakers? When I worked in National Assembly, I know a couple of lawmakers that get bills, that have people write bills for them, or people bring bills and they take it on and then they push it into to the floor of the house. So with that kind of goal in mind, or even without the connect, just with the goal to pursue that kind of thing, is the process different?
Yes, over to you now, Wale. But then in your response, because we're supposed to close in a few minutes, in responding also about some tips to meet our goals for 2024. Yeah.
Okay, I think that should be the simplest one. I think let me start with the goal, the writing goal. Like you have to travel at your pace. So anyone that has not really been writing before, it will be out of beat to now say, this year I want to write maybe 6 articles. That might be easier or possible for Tenny, but you have to look at your own other pressing issues and then what you have been doing before, because it's like somebody that has not been exercising and suddenly show up maybe at a relay event or maybe one sporting activities. It's not going to work. So like where I work, we also have writing targets, like your annual work plan. So I would say maybe you can start to say you want to write maybe 3-4 articles this year, and then you break that down to say maybe 1 per quarter. to say between January and February and March, I'm going to write one article, 1,000 words. You might not be clear about what detail is going to be now, or maybe one of the ideas that you have been churning over and over in your mind before. So I think that is the starting point. And maybe for people that are probably working in academic domain, that one you can't even determine. You can write, you don't know when it's going to come out. So you can just have a target to say, I want to write 2 papers this year. That you write it this year is not a guarantee that it's going to come out maybe in the next 24 months, but at least you will have made a move to say, this is the goal that I want to reach this year. So the discipline required to now stay committed to that goal is what actually makes the difference. So it's about starting from somewhere. But I can say that for people that are already established, you can get to the point that you can be writing maybe 1 article per month. For instance, it is very, very possible because it becomes very easier for you because it's something that you've perfected over time. But it's good to start from somewhere. What I've not said, which I think is also very important, the reason why I think people should write is because we're living in a time that 2 things are going to set you apart, but both are actually based on communication skill. Your ability to speak and your ability to write, because the world will continually remain in demand for content in different areas. Maybe it's in fashion, culture, public policy. So the critical skills that I think everyone that is here needs to actually build up along the line is that communication skill, the writing skill, the speaking skills, which are very, very important. And those are the things that we're talking about here today. So for me, that is how to go about the writing goal for the year. Just break it down to say, if it is 1,000 words, I'll be writing at least 250 words or 100 words per day. So you break it down to that granular detail so that on the final analysis, you're able to pursue your writing goal for the year. What is the end goal of policy writing? Simple, to influence public policy. That is the end goal. And like Tenny said here up there, you show up in meeting and people say, I've been following you. Yes, I've read your work before. So you know that people are actually reading your work, the more you make it accessible. And for me, one of the key targets to do is to look at the newspaper that I talk about. It's very, very important to look at that dimension. I've heard people publish on their Medium. They write very well. And in fact, I have a lady friend in Abuja. She writes very well, but she's writing on Medium. And I say, how many followers do you have on Medium? If you are an influential person that has a lot of followers, then maybe you can gain traction. So I told her, I said, go and publish it in maybe cable or premium times, and come and share on your Medium or share on your LinkedIn or Twitter and all those things. So it's very, very important. That newspaper outlet provides wider latitude for all of us to be able to showcase our writing skills and provide solutions to local and global challenges. So I think I will advise that people prioritize that area of a newspaper in terms of policy writing. We've been talking about policy writing, and the question from Alex and the point raised by Tenny is very, very key. I think largely a greater percentage of our conversation here are seeing policy writing as something that must be in the public domain. That is just one truth. The real truth and the authentic truth that you need to hear as I wrap up is that you need to cultivate relationship with people in the corridor of policy making. That is the big policy writing. It's not only the one the other one we've been talking about is you writing as an advocate, using writing as an advocacy tool. The real deal, because I've worked in a public policy arena before, and I know that a lot of things that I say in the public domain were actually hatched because my former boss is a politician who has relationship with people in the corridor of power. So what you see is that we're looking at, maybe they look at a school feeding program. Can we get a concept note from you? So all of us, we come together, we quickly put together, then they are using it to talk to the governor. You think maybe the governor, no. It is people who take those documents to those people in power. And that's the reason why I like having someone like Alex in this domain. I think people should get his contact because he should be able to get your policy to people that need them in the National Assembly. But as lighter as that might appear, or as joking as it might appear, this is how it starts from. The real policy, so that I don't discountenance what we've been talking about. Another level or layer of policy writing is the one that you actually look at the problem in the society and you pass a concept note, an idea of maybe maximum of 5 pages to people in the corridor of power to say, come, you people have not been able to solve the energy crisis in this country. These and these and these are what countries have done in Colombia. These is what they did in Mexico. And these are the realities on ground. You are flaring your gas. These and these are people that you should talk to, people that you should, you itemize those things, and it doesn't get into the pages of the newspaper. It doesn't get into any academic journal. It is just a direct engagement with the people in government. And I think that is the area that most of us here should actually target, that you come to the point that you become a thought leader in your field, maybe it's in public health or for public financing or whatever it is, or trade and investment, that people can actually come for you from government to say, give us your advisory on this matter. That is a more respected level of policy writing that I think all of us should gravitate towards. I've done a work in the past 2 years with Central Africa Police Chief. You are not going to see that document most likely in the public domain, but we carried out a huge threat assessment, and we are using that to actually engage with the police in Central Africa. So you will not see it on the pages of newspaper or anywhere, but it is a research that was carried out, and it is carried out for the purpose of engaging directly with people who have the duty of care and who can actually act on your recommendation. So on a final note, having talked about the advocacy component of writing, I think this should be the major target for all of us, that you are actually able to pass what you are writing to people who can implement your recommendation. And by doing that, it is not by going on journal or publishing platform. It's in handing over those documents to those people, to use them to develop legislations, to use them to develop policy response to some of the challenges that are affecting the countries in which we work. So that is the main thing. But the essential skill set and tools required are the things that we have talked about in the past few minutes that we started this conversation. It is the same thing. The only difference is that this one gets you a faster result if they buy into the idea, to the contrary to those ones that you actually publish and you don't know who is using them.
Oh my God, Wale, this has been brilliant. I mean, thank you so much for sharing all of this with us. And like what you said, the product publishing is just to demonstrate expertise, but then the end goal, the target is influencing policy making. If I wake up today and I send a letter or a message to the Minister of Industry, Trade and Investment, if I didn't have any publications in that space, there is no reason for her to take me seriously as a credible interlocutor in the space. But then when I start to do the targeted advocacy, or when I do the targeted advocacy, I can then add the links to my publications to say, this is who I am, these are some of my ideas, and then immediately they are interested. And I can even share directly that this new administration, twice now, I've been approached by ministries to come and join them as an advisor because of my writing, right? So the end goal is policy influencing, but then first of all, you have to build that broad base of expertise to be able to demonstrate that you can actually tackle the issues that you want to try to tackle. So this has been brilliant, like we said, and like everyone has said, thank you so much, Wale, for sharing all of this with us. The recording is going to be made available. We're going to send it via email, but also we're going to add it to the WhatsApp group, the WhatsApp community that we have created, as well as a recording of the session we had last year on the technicalities of policy writing. So we encourage everyone. One thing that is happening in the development space or in the global economy is that there's not enough knowledge production from the people that are affected by these problems themselves. So we have many times other people speaking on our behalf. So we all need to be producing a lot more. What you say on your WhatsApp group, what you say to your friends, document it, write it down, and put it out there. People have told me that they went to a workshop in Madagascar and saw my writing on the board as part of the workshop. I haven't been to Madagascar myself, but then my writing got to Madagascar. So document your ideas. Even in the process of writing, you are able to consolidate your ideas better. You're able to close the gaps in your ideas, put it out there, and then seek to influence policy to solve some of the big problems that we have in our society. So I think at this rate, we're going to come to a close. Thanks to everyone that joined in. We're going to keep you updated if we have subsequent sessions, maybe on AI and how to use it. For the WhatsApp link, I can see a complaint that it's broken. We're also going to share it via email to everyone that was part of this meeting. And maybe another thank you to Wale. Thank you so much for sharing all of this with us. And I think this is the first webinar you're doing on writing specifically, isn't it? Yeah. Thank you so much.
Yes, this is my first time, and I hope I didn't disappoint the audience.
You did not disappoint at all. No, the knowledge was just overflowing. Thank you so much for making the time to join us. And yes, I think we're going to bring it to a close. Ida, do you have any last statements, closing remarks, just to close the webinar? We can hear you. Okay.
Able to drop a lot of insightful information. I've taken a lot of notes and tips. I think it's windy here. I don't know if you can hear me properly, but you've given me lots of tips to live by, and I think a lot of people have that as well. So thank you so much. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you so much. And thanks to everyone. Have a lovely, and sorry, the last question about trainings. Yes, you can email us. I think our contact is on the group, or you have it in your email already. Yes, we do offer paid trainings, both to individuals and to organizations. So you can inquire from us about that. And on that, have a lovely Saturday ahead. Thank you.
Bye. Thank you, Dr. Wale. Thanks,
Thank you so
Tini.
much.
Bye.
Thank you and bye-bye.